Kairete. Welcome to the second installment in my ancient Greek text series. The first text we're looking at is the Fragments of Heraclitus. If you haven't yet watched the introduction to this series, I would recommend starting there for context. So without further ado, let's continue the fragments. Tu logodeiontos xynou, zousin hoipoloi hosidian ekontes pronesin. So we must follow the common, yet though my word is common, the many live as if they had a wisdom of their own. Here's a literal gloss of the text. This fragment was also quoted by Sextus Empiricus in Against the Mathematicians. Note the word xynou here. This is the Ionian dialect form of the word koinos, incidentally where the term koine comes from, but literally it just means common, like the common tongue in the case of koine, for example. Hoi polloi, this is a fairly common formula you see in ancient Greek texts referring to the masses or lay people, essentially. It literally just means the many. Perimegetus heliou, eurospodos anthropeiou. The sun is the width of a human foot. Quoted by Aetius in Opinions. This fragment is pretty self-explanatory. It's worth noting here that being more archaic than standard 5th century Attic, Ionian tends to use the definite article less often than later Greek dialects. You'll notice this next fragment is actually in Latin. This is because the original ancient Greek text has been lost, or possibly that it never existed, as this might have been a later forgery attributed to Heraclitus erroneously. This fragment originates from a medieval source, namely the writings of Saint Albert the Great, a Dominican friar from the 13th century, so recorded over a millennium after Heraclitus's lifetime. Regardless of its authenticity, it's usually included in collections of his fragments, so we can practice a bit of Latin here too. Si felicitas esset in delectationibus corporis, boves felices diceremus, cum inveniantur robum ad comedendum. Oxen are happy when they find bitter vetches to eat. Again, this is a pretty straightforward aphorism. A minor botanical note, oribus, or bitter vetch, is a type of Mediterranean wild pea used for cattle feed in antiquity. Its tubers contain appetite-suppressant compounds, so perhaps they were perceived as being a uniquely satiating food for cattle. Incidentally, the ancient Greek word for oribus was orobos. This fragment is not always included in collections of Heraclitus's sayings, as its authenticity is disputed. However, in the interest of completeness, and since we've already included a disputed fragment anyway, I'll try to include as complete a collection as possible here. Kata logonde hoareon symballetai hebdomas kata selanen, diaireitai de katatas arctus, atanatum nemes semeo. Regarding the reckoning of time, the week is organized according to the moon, but divided according to the she-bears, two divine portents of immortal memory. Quoted by Anatolius. The use of the term logos here is actually one instance where Heraclitus uses the word to refer to its literal meaning, rather than the word or logos concept itself. Also note that in das Arctus, we're using the feminine form of the article, so it implies female bears. Mnemes here comes from mneme, meaning memory, literally, but it's also the name of one of the muses from Greek mythology. And finally, the term semeo is in the dual. It's a rare usage of the dual form, so referring to two objects or two signs. In this case, it refers to the constellations of the Big and Little Dipper, used to keep track of the seasons in many ancient cultures. Kathairon taidallos haimati miai nomenoi, hokoion eitis eis pelon embas peloi aponisoito. Maines taidan dokeoi eitis min anthropon epitrasaito huto poieunta, kai toi sagalmaside tuteioisin eukontai. Hokoionetis tois domoisi las canavoito, utiginoskon taiusud heroas hoitinesesi. They vainly purify themselves by defiling themselves with blood, just as if one who had stepped into the mud were to wash his feet in mud. Any man who marked him doing thus would deem him mad. And they pray to these images as if one were to talk with a man's house, knowing not what gods or heroes are. Quoted from Fragments of a Greek Theosophist. The term agalmasi here comes from the word agalma, meaning honor. It could also refer to statues or idols built to honor gods in temples, as it does in this case. Lescanewa is a verb that means to talk, but in this context especially, it has a pejorative connotation. So I think the English term recently popularized by Gen Z, yap, would actually be a decent translation here. Ho heliosu monon, ga tapero Herakleitos paesi, neos epemere estin, alai neos synekos, haptetai kai spennutai. The sun is new every day, quoted by Aristotle in Meteorology. The English translation of this fragment is usually just condensed down to "the sun is new every day," as Aristotle doesn't quote him directly, and it's really more of a paraphrase. Haptetai kai spennutai. Heraclitus reuses this phrase often in his aphorisms. Hapto implies kindling a fire or burning something up, while spennumi implies letting something burn out or extinguish, like coal embers perhaps. I think it's meant to invoke the imagery of a candle flame or campfire flickering, a metaphor for the cycle of life and death. Ei panta taunta kap nos genoito, chrien esan diagnoian. If all things were turned to smoke, the nostrils would distinguish them. Quoted by Aristotle in Sense and Sensibilia. To antixun symperon, kai ekton diaperonton kalisten harmonian, kai panta katerin ginestai. It is the opposite which is good for us. Quoted by Aristotle in his famous work Nicomachean Ethics. Note that Eris here is the goddess of strife and conflict, Erin or Eris. The Roman equivalent would be Discordia or discord. Onus simartan alestai malone cruson. Donkeys would rather have straw than gold. Sulapsies. Hola caiucola. Symperomenon diaperomenon. Synaidon diaidon. Kai ekpanton hen, kai exenos panta. Couples are things whole and things not whole, what is drawn together and what is drawn asunder, the harmonious and the discordant. The one is made up of all things, and all things issue from the one. Quoted by Aristotle in On the Universe. The term sulapsies here is a compound that comes from sun, meaning together or with, and lapsis, meaning taking. So it refers to couples or unions of two. Pangar herpeton plage nemetai. Every beast is driven to pasture with blows. Quoted by Aristotle in On the Universe. Herpeton here originally meant anything that creeps or crawls on the earth, and then it eventually came to mean four-legged animals like cattle, and then came to refer to snakes and reptiles specifically, which is the origin of the modern word herpetology. The verb nemo is a very interesting word. It comes from the same Proto-Indo-European root as the German nehmen, to take, English num, and Latin numerus, where we get the word number as well. The original root could probably have meant take or give, depending on context. In Greek, it meant to graze livestock, but oddly, it could also refer to plundering and distributing loot by piracy. It's also the name of the goddess Nemesis, patroness of vengeance and retribution for the sin of hubris or insolence before the gods. Potamoisitoisin autoisin embainusin hetera, kai hetera hydatai pirrei. You cannot step twice into the same rivers, for fresh waters are ever flowing in upon you. Quoted originally by Arius Didymus, and in turn by Eusebius in Preparatio Evangelica. This is a variation of one of Heraclitus's most famous quotes, "You can never step into the same river twice." Hyes borboroi hedontai malo ne kataroi hydati. To delight in the mire, quoted by Clement of Alexandria in Stromata. The translated quote is often abbreviated in English translations, again, due to being more of a paraphrase in the quoted text. Nyktipolois, magois, bakois, lanais, mystais, takarnomizomena katanthropus mysteria anierostimreutai. Nightwalkers, Magians, Bakoi, Lenai, and the initiated, the mysteries practiced among men are unholy mysteries, quoted by Clement of Alexandria in Protrepticus. Nyktipolois here literally means night walkers. It's used as an epithet for several Greek gods and their worshippers, namely Dionysus, god of wine and madness, Persephone, goddess of the underworld, and Artemis, goddess of the hunt and the moon. These gods were often worshipped by underground mystery cults, into which members had to be initiated in secret, especially Dionysus most famously in the Eleusinian Mysteries. Magois just means mages, practitioners of magic or sorcery. Bakois and Lanais are other names for worshippers of Bacchus, another epithet for Dionysus. Mystais refers to initiates into mystery cults. Nomizomena means that which is practiced or customs, and anierosti is the alpha privative of hieros, meaning unholy. Quick side note, we're actually going to skip fragment 15 for now, as it deals with a lewd and obscene subject matter, which might render this video ineligible for monetization. So perhaps tune in later for a future video on Greek philosophy after dark. To me du non pote, pos santis lathoi. How can one hide from that which never sets? Quoted by Clement of Alexandria and Pedagogus. Ugar proneusi toiau tapoloi, hokoi enkyreusin, ude matontes ginoscusin, heo utoi side doceusi. The many do not take heed of such things as those they meet with, nor do they mark them when they are taught, though they think they do. This and the fragments that follow were all quoted by Clement of Alexandria in Stromata. The word proneusi is the origin of the word phronesis, a kind of practical wisdom which comes from experience. Ean me elpetai anelpiston ukexaurase, anexerauneton eon kaiaporon. If you do not expect the unexpected, you will not find it, for it is hard to be sought out and difficult. Elpetai here comes from the verb elpo. When used in the middle voice, as it is here, it can either mean expect or hope for, or alternatively to fear or to be anxious about something, so it's value neutral, essentially. Given that, expect is probably the best translation here. That completes about a quarter of the way through the Fragments of Heraclitus, so I'll wrap up the first video here, and we'll continue again in the next video. I hope you found this information useful and interesting. If so, I would appreciate a like and subscribe for more ancient Greek text readings. If you have any ideas or suggestions for future videos, please feel free to leave a comment below as well. Eucharisto kai roste.